Dude, you gotta put.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody, CAIR family, CAIR viewers, and those who are joining us on Facebook and in other spaces. I hope everybody is doing well. My name is Abbas Barzagard, National Director of Research and Advocacy. Very excited to be joining you today. I have not been involved in the show for quite a few months, but it's really nice to see how it's evolved. Today with me, we have my beloved colleague and friend, Robert McCaw, Director of Government Affairs. Is that the proper title there, Robert?
That is my proper title.
Because you know how it is. You know how it is. Sometimes I just Robert does political and government stuff. You have a statistical question, ask me. If you got a policy question, ask Robert. It's great to see you, Robert. How are you?
It's good seeing you. I was trying to say before we jumped on that I wanted a real good big close-up of that "I want change" poster behind you because it's awesome.
You like that? Check this out.
Yeah,
Check it out. Have you ever seen that before? It's a Banksy piece.
Is it? Oh, I love Banksy.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be hard for me to kind of zoom in. I've got my coordinates wrong here, but
just Google it. Everyone Google it. I want change, Banksy. Great.
Yeah, keep your coins. I want change. So alhamdulillah. So, viewers, guests, thank you as always for joining us on the show today. As you know, every day in the news cycle these days, there's a question about the elections. Okay, this is the top of the hour. This is what we're going to be talking about for the next 6 weeks. And so you can guarantee that today we want to dig in just a little bit on what the mood is with the country, what our community is thinking about when it comes to this election, and what our future actually looks like. And so to that effect, we're very excited today because we have some colleagues here from MPAC, which is the Muslim Public Action Committee. MPAC is one of the sort of stalwarts of the Muslim community, institutionally representing our voice in policy spaces, in media spaces, even in sort of Hollywood spaces. MPAC has done tremendous work over the years, and I personally am very excited to have them on board, and we're going to be walking through a discussion of a new report that they have out. Robert, what's their report all about, or should we bring them on and ask them?
Yeah, no, let's bring them on. They can tell us everything. This is my intern, Hamza. We are live on the air.
Hey, Hamza, how are you?
Assalamu alaikum, guys.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. So let me just take a quick moment, everybody. This is Ahmed Badawi and Mohammed Bakr Al-Din Mohid from MPAC. Guys, I don't have your titles in front of me. I just know that I know you from working on a day-to-day basis. Why don't you tell our audiences hello and also what your titles are and what you work on over at MPAC?
Thanks, Abbas. Yeah, so I'm Adam Badawi. I'm the policy analyst for the Muslim Public Affairs Council. And with me is Bakr. I'll let him introduce himself and his title as well. And then we can get into what we have for you guys today and what we're looking forward to talking about.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm Mohammed Bakr Muhyiddin. I'm the Policy Program Manager at Muslim Public Affairs Council. As Abbas said, we do government stuff. Well, we don't do the law stuff. We're not lawyers.
Yeah.
And, I want to apologize I am going to apologize to our viewers that we do not have proper female representation on the panel today. There are an amazing number of women that are working right alongside and ahead of us in this space. You all know them well. Some of these are your former boss, Adam, and some of these are our colleagues in different spaces. And so we do apologize to the viewers about that, but we are still trying to bring out sort of the most relevant conversations to you at the most pertinent of times. So if you have suggestions on individuals and on topics and issues, of course, send them up to CAIR, to MPAC, a million ways to get in touch with us. So let's go ahead and jump in. Robert, you want to put these guys to a grilling?
I wouldn't put it to a grilling, but I'm just really interested in this report. I want to hear all about it. So your Tale of Two Futures project tries to look at both parties, the Republican and the Democratic Party, in their very distinct ways. How does your report look at these parties? How does it understand where they're coming from and where they want to lead America? And where does that leave the American Muslim community? And that's enough questions really for the whole half hour. So just go.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. So yeah, as you mentioned, our project really tries to look at parties in a distinctive way. I think we ourselves released a voter guide back in March, which looked at the Democratic Party primary candidates from the perspective basically of, okay, here's what their campaign platforms and websites promise, and then this is kind of what you can expect moving forward. We wanted to take a different approach. So in this paper, we borrowed from a professor at UC Davis. Her name is Stephanie Mudge, who in her book, Leftism Reinvented, gave an account of parties and basically what they try to do, the principal actions that they take in order to craft policy. And so we looked there to decide, to project how a Democratic candidate and a Republican candidate for president would, handle issues that are relevant to the American Muslim community. So those principal actions in the literature are establishing facts, mobilizing constituencies, and seeking and ultimately claiming power or political office. These are all work hand in hand together. You can kind of, hopefully see already their interconnection as parties try to establish what facts on of the matter are on given policy issues, mobilize constituencies in response to these facts of the matter, and then ultimately pass policy through the representatives in office or the private corporations that are involved in public-private partnerships or interest groups who have relationships with party networks. So we're kind of trying to look at, okay, what are the institutional dynamics, the social networks that consist within parties, and this is where the American Muslim community should look when trying to project what parties might do, and then how they can engage themselves so that we could maybe change the state of play in a way that is actually more conducive to the status and well-being of American Muslims and our organization's constituents. The paper itself is it doesn't take a stance on one candidate or the other. We are just kind of trying to offer a sober analysis of candidates through this approach to parties. And then, based on the analysis, the reader themselves can make a choice as to who is the candidate they think to lead them through to the future. And that's the purpose of the title of the paper, Tale of Two Futures, is telling the story, right? There's one of two possible futures that our country is going to be heading toward, and it's going to be individual voter choices that drive us there. Bakr, I'll let you fill in if you have something else to add.
Sure. So we are a 501c3. So we're nonpartisan. We're not on side of any of the politicians. Our goal is Muslim voter turnout. And this election is crucial to have a strong Muslim voter turnout. The phenomena that we saw happen in 2016, like Muslim turnout was, I believe, lower than previous years, at least in Michigan, where I am from. Dearborn could have flipped the state of Michigan. It could have flipped Wayne County. It could have flipped, flipping the whole state if we had our average turnout in Michigan, right? The problem was people would look at the two candidates. Michigan was voted for Bernie in the primaries. Bernie was out, so they felt like some want to sabotage all of their vote and vote for another party. Others voted for Harambe, and others. I have a friend that put his cat as president, voted in, and others just didn't bother voting. They didn't go to the polls and they didn't cast their vote. So the point of this paper is to show that there is no perfect candidate. We are 1% of the population. We can only offer so much. However, our vote is the most valuable when it comes down to close elections, where the electoral college winner does not match up with the popular vote. Our 1% can make a difference in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Minnesota and Arizona and possibly even Texas, many other states. Our 1% of the population can definitely push the election one way or another. So what this paper illustrates is that you might not like one president, you might not like another president or two candidates. However, one of them will definitely have a bigger effect on your family than the latter, whether it might be through a Muslim ban or it might be through whatever. So people,
of course. I think people really lived. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I do think people really did realize, after the last election, where many people did sit out, and had, 8 years of the same administration, there's a kind of apathy that sets in, a latency and leniency towards sort of what's happening. And so a lot of people just kind of, sidestepped that last election. And I think they realized very quickly that policy does make a difference and that their vote does make a difference. So I want to ask you all, understanding fully that we are, both of our organizations, we're 501c3s, we do not do direct political endorsements or anything related to campaign work. But for these policy issues, it's always hard for me to kind of drill down for people in a very illustrative way what the difference is between one party's position and another party's position. So, what can people look forward to in the report? Is there a good example where you can say there's really a difference, right? Mm-hmm. And what are those differences? Can you just tell me, give me a good example? Is it, I know the difference between a paved road and a concrete road, right? Mm-hmm. So tell me what does the path look like?
Yeah, so that's I'm glad you asked that question, Abbas, because the thing that our paper really tries to tease out is, in fact, the relevant difference between candidates. A lot of times, I know that my uncles and elders, they'll say, oh, the parties are the same, or something like this, which tends toward this kind of nihilism or escapism that Bakker was alluding to earlier. But there are obviously relevant differences between the two parties. And so this paper tries to bring out what they are, which is the actual networks, social networks, institutional dynamics, and groups that parties actually engage in order to pass legislation on a given set of issues. So, for example, our paper analyzes in the section on civil rights, civil liberties, and human rights, we tease out that both parties obviously look at each of these three categories, concepts, as in a similar way, which is these are the political rights that we afford to citizens, either for purposes of recognizing harm and redressing said harm, or potentially even redistribution of resources. But they both take different approaches to each of these issues based on the groups that they're actually involved with. So, for example, illustratively, we identified this kind of movement on the GOP side in partnership with an organization, the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation, and the Federalist Society. These through the GOP apparatus, essentially, these organizations are kind of involved in a process to pass anti-Sharia legislation in state legislatures to stock lower level courts and ultimately maybe even the Supreme Court with a judge that interprets the law in line with a specific interpretation of the Constitution and maybe even a different moral vision for the society. I mean, these are political moves. This isn't a clandestine conspiracy operation. Yeah. Right. This is just
all very forward, right? Like it's all above water, right?
I wouldn't even know
what Republicans call value-based voting. So it's really important to understand what their values are.
Yeah.
And Democrats.
What was that, Mohammed? Go ahead, Bakker.
Yeah, I was going to say I wouldn't even consider like a difference between the two parties, rather a difference between the two candidates, because you have many prominent members of the GOP that have endorsed Biden in this current election right now. So even the party values, it seems very like I certainly have not. It's been maybe 3 or 4 elections in my lifetime, but this is the first time where I see prominent members of one party endorsing the other candidate.
It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think parties are really important though, because as you can look in Congress, there's a great variety amongst the views of Democrats or Republicans, right? But when the party whip comes along and Pelosi or McConnell has the directive that we're all voting on X today, this is what your report really is about. The total sum of like, what are these values driving at?
Mm-hmm.
But if I can also point out a difference of how policies from different administrations can make a difference. One of the most common attacks on the Democratic Party that we'd hear among Muslims is that President Obama's administration bombed 7 Muslim countries throughout the time. And we don't know what Trump has done over the past few years, because he rescinded Obama's executive order that they have to report every drone attack and how many victims there are and how many non-intended targeted victims also were killed in those attacks, those drone attacks. So we criticize Obama, but his administration gave us the ability to know what they're doing and what they're conducting and what nations are being bombed. Right now, with this administration, currently we have to resort to on-ground reporting that if it makes it to our to our media, which doesn't even get reported about. But like Somalia has been heavily bombarded by drones over the past couple of years, I believe more than anything that President Obama has done and whatnot. So this is like it's a prime example that where two different administrations, two different parties can have a humongous toll not only on us here locally, but even on the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. I do want to kind of keep a note on the clock. You know, we typically keep this to about half an hour. I'm happy to go just a little bit over because I think we stopped a little bit over. We can definitely bleed over. I just want to kind of be mindful about that. But it's been great working with you guys over the last couple of years as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to ask you guys, since this is almost the other side of the coin that we're brandishing with this paper, which is about how citizens can engage parties. CAIR does a lot of work to increase voter turnout. I mean, how are some of the ways that you guys are getting Muslims to turn out the vote? What are, if you guys have the stats on Muslim voter turnout in the past, and maybe if you have any to kind of gauge participation in 2020?
Yeah, you can't really say you're increasing the Muslim vote if you don't know how many Muslims by percentage vote, right? So in cracking those numbers, we found in 2019, 73% of eligible Muslims were registered to vote. But in comparison to other faith groups where, 85 to 90% of some eligible voters are already registered, there's a big divide between how Muslims are registered to vote as a faith community and other faith communities. And so that's an area we need to catch up. Thankfully, if 73% of eligible Muslims are registered to vote, on average, 67% of Americans are registered to vote. So Muslims, like other faith communities, are just like slightly on average doing better than the average American for voting overall. That's not to say like our youth are, on pair to other categories, but the over-under, we're actually doing pretty good for registration. 61% of Muslims voted in the 2016 presidential elections, and 59% voted in the midterms. So when you're looking at that, there's room for Muslims to increase their overall vote. When CAIR did an analytical approach to how many Muslims are registered to vote, we compared a common list of 40,000 Muslim names and looked at ethnicities where over 90% of those nationalities are Muslim by religion, and we found that there's over 1 million registered Muslim voters that we're aware of. I actually believe that number is even higher because I'm Muslim. My name is Robert Stephen McCaw. I'm not popping up on any list. And frankly, there's a lot more African-American converts than guys like me out there. And they're not all, adopting Muslim names. So if 1/3 of the Muslim community is African-American, but only a fraction of African-American Muslims have identifiable Muslim names, the number is well over 1 million, which is great. So any given election, like over 600,000 Muslims can turn out to vote. And our concern was that was a little bit depressed in the last presidential election. Like you said, people were voting for Harambe or their cat. According to /Islam on Reddit, all cats are Muslim, by the way. And so what we found is that we need to inspire Muslims to get out to vote. What is CAIR doing? In the primaries alone, we did a massive robocall for every Muslim landline registered voter we could identify. We made over 140,000 phone calls, automated, nice pre-recorded message, my voice right to the phone, and it reached some 600,000 individuals that lived in those households. So if you tell one person to get the vote, hopefully people all meet at the dinner table still, in the living room watching TV, and someone said, oh, we got a call from CAIR, we should get out the vote. But we can't just go automated. And, like every other group out there, CAIR chapters nationwide this coming October. We haven't really publicly announced it too much, so sneak preview. We've bought lists of registered Muslim voters with cell phones. We have identified at least over 200,000 active cell phone numbers. We're also working with other partners in states. So we have at least 250,000 cell phone numbers. Not as much funds to call every single cell phone number, texting them or calling them. But, still taking donations. Go to CAIR Donate. But we are going to do text banks across the country, urging Muslims to get out the vote. We're going to be targeting those Muslims not only in battleground states, but across the country, because we're building that Muslim political power. And we're hoping on the night before the election day, if you have a landline and you're Muslim, you're getting a phone call. And in the morning, if you have a cell phone, you're going to get a text message if you opted into our campaign. And we'll remind you to get up, get out, and vote. And so in addition to like the strategic communications that we're all doing, whether that's like social media reminders, advertisements, PSAs, I think it's really important that CAIR, MPAC, Empower, other national Muslim organizations, allied organizations in the Arab or Maasai community, if we're all messaging our community to get out the vote, if we can increase our voter participation by 10% and start matching the numbers of other faith communities, that 1% of the population actually has a significant impact. I'll never say Muslims swing an election, but we can tip a bunch of them. And so if it comes down to 20, 30, 40, 50, 80,000 votes in some cities, several cities over 150,000 votes, we have the numbers and we have the Muslims, and we can really swing an election. I'm not saying Muslims should vote Democrat, but in our last polling, over 67%, 70% of Muslims identified as voting for a Democratic candidate. 15 to 20% of Muslims vote for Republicans. If you're a Republican and you think it's going to come down to 100 votes and you haven't hit up your mosque yet, and there's 1,000 people in that community, that's where they are. Those are your people. And if you're a Democrat and it's still tight margins, why are you not talking to Muslims? So
hey, let me cut in real quick, Robert.
Sorry. I'll always rant about numbers.
No. Thank you, Robert. I just want to reiterate something for the viewers real quick that may have missed that, because mashallah, thank you for all the input. But just to recap, based off of not just CAIR's research, but consistent research across multiple platforms, and mashallah, people really need to understand that our institutions are sophisticated now. You know what I mean? We're a couple generations deep. Alhamdulillah, we have a handle on this space, and we have research and we have statistics to understand our community's voting habits and patterns. So according to kind of available data out there, the top line story is that, like other faith-based communities, Muslims are voting higher and are in higher registration marks than the general public. Correct? Yes. Okay. But we are still within that block of faith communities, lower than those others, but not by too much.
All others.
Okay. Yes. And that point that you made about the 2016 election being like 61%, to have the midterm at 59 isn't too bad, right? Because right, like most of the time, participation in midterms drops off pretty heavily. So, inshallah, this trend of increased engagement will continue, and we can see the thumbprint of the Muslim American community, get stronger and stronger on the next steps. Look, we're at 3:30, guys. I'm going to kind of call it at 5 minutes. So,
all right. So I got
if you guys don't mind, go ahead.
There's been an increase of Muslims running for office since the Muslim ban. Why do you think that is? How is your report feeding these candidates like more information or constituents about people running for office?
Well, it doesn't touch on that. That's something that we definitely acknowledge, though. I mean, we've written about it a lot in the past. The Muslims running for office. Like we noticed that trend after 2016 and 2018, and that was something we're happy to say that some MPAC alumni even are some of those people running for office. And so, for us, we're now trying to do this work on the other side, right? Which is to say, how can constituents engage party networks now, knowing that even they have some allies in government. So for us, this sort of tension is, we address it through reference to what we call in the paper the party society problematic, which is just
what is that? I mean, that's kind of heavy, man. I know that you got a little academic thing going on here, Adam. But what is this problem? Party society problematic you talk about?
I'm glad you asked. So for us, it's just yes, it's right. You're right. It's an academic jargony phrase that just gets at the dilemma between what is the nature of the relationship between political parties and citizens or civil society. I mean, some people understand this relationship as effectively citizens are political objects that are acted upon by parties. And the job of organizations like ours is to mediate this relationship. I mean, at MPAC, we vehemently disagree with this. We think that there's a dynamism and complexity across the board. I mean, this paper tries to acknowledge the complexity and dynamism in party structures. And a future publication that we're going to come out with, inshallah, in mid-October is going to get at some of this complexity among Americans and American Muslims specifically. So the paper acknowledges, like for instance, there's no singular set of American Muslim issues, just as there's no monolithic American Muslim to which one can appeal. However, there are points of convergence between American Muslims, which cross social, political, and class differences. And civic organizations like ours have a unique responsibility to mediate between parties and society in ways that actually benefit our constituencies.
Let me ask you a question real quick about parties and about politics and political engagement. This is before we close out, and I have to add another question on this, but I'd like to address something around like political literacy. I don't know if that's a concept or if that's an idea, but in this sort of party society problematic, what I often find is that I in no way, shape, or form identify with a political party to think about my life as a citizen, as a member of my neighborhood, or as a member of my city, or my business community, or anything of that sort, right? And oftentimes I myself, even as sort of involved as I am, I find myself quite lost when it comes to just understanding electoral politics, understanding sort of how a campaign functions and things like that. Has your research sort of given you any insight into where our community is at with this issue around political literacy? I know that we're a very opinionated community, and we're a very sort of strident and zealous community when it comes to the things that we care about, because our community is at the center of global affairs in a diasporal sense, in a geopolitical sense. So it's expected that we would care about these issues, but I often find a kind of mismatch between passion and literacy. Any comments there?
Yeah, I actually find that the community is very literate on issues. I mean, to use that term, it's really a matter of, do they consider the organizations trying to bring them into the fold under one of the two parties, under get out the vote measures? Do they consider them legitimate? Do they trust them? Do they think that they're getting concessions from the people that they themselves are supposed to be the kind of intermediaries between citizens and politicians, right? So I actually find
hello?
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, my internet cut out.
Oh, it did?
Yeah, I mean, so for us, we find that the literacy, knowledge of issues, I mean, these aren't so complicated. I trust people to know what's pertinent to their lives. The responsibility is on both sides, really, to meet in the middle under the banner of like a kind of broader effort that's political, that sees spaces for opportunities for constructive engagement. What we're doing, we're doing our part as part of the Million Muslim Votes campaign, and our work with organizations like yours, organizations like Engage, for exactly this purpose, to do our part in reaching out to constituents who we recognize in our conversations with them as being very literate and very aware of the issues that are most important to them.
Mashallah, mashallah. Before we head out, Bakr, what do you think those top line issues are? What do you think our community cares about the most this election?
So our community, as Adam said, differs in the issues that they care about. We care about socio-political issues and issues that are like do with the economy where we live. We have this one idea that Muslims are all business owners and they're all engineers and doctors, which is far from the reality. We have many Muslims in all the different social classes. Muslims care about the welfare issues, food stamps, Medicaid for all. Muslims also care a lot about foreign policy, of course, and it's never the only issue that's voted upon, but it's really discussed more. So it really depends. Muslims, we're not monolithic at all. Go to a zip code and find the Muslims there, and their issues will differ drastically from Muslims in another zip code. I mean, we see that in Michigan between we're in Detroit and we're in the suburbs, right?
I think that's a really top line point. No, thank you. I think it's a very important point that people don't realize. If one understands what the Muslim community actually is, we have a diversity in terms of social class, ethnic background, religious background, ideological diversity that is truly, truly not monolithic. And I think, that diversity is our strength, So I wanted to share with you all one last quote that is something that has stayed with me for a long time. For some reason in my head, it's ascribed to Al-Hajj Malcolm X. However, I can't find the quote anywhere. Okay, so I'm just going to give it to you, provisionally. And it is that when it comes to voter turnout, he said, the black voter isn't apathetic. And likewise, Muslim voter isn't nihilistic or apathetic. It's quite the opposite, right? He said the black voter isn't apathetic. The black voter is suspicious, right? Absolutely. It's suspicious that their vote doesn't matter. And they have every right to think that. And so in our community, we really have to also, I believe, really get over that, because I find it applicable to not just our community, but to so many other communities that have been on the sidelines of mainstream politics, who have been the victims of policies and decisions that are made for them on behalf of them by people who know nothing about them. And so it really, I applaud MPAC very much for its sustained work over the years and for bringing to light these kind of opportunities so that we can better inform our public. So last question is, Adam, where can we find the report?
Yeah, thanks, Avas. So you can find the report now at taleoftwofutures.com. Just it's no numbers, obviously no spaces, taleoftwofutures.com. You could put in your information and get the name and email and get the paper delivered to you, and it'll pop up and you can download it from there as well. And inshallah, we'll have follow-up programming to follow this. I mean, for us, this is establishing a kind of approach to politics that we think is allows for progressive collectivism. Is sort of something we're calling it. Broad-based coalitions to engage party networks. This is the only way. This is the basis of MPAC's theory of civic and political engagement, and we think it's a fruitful path, and hopefully it's one that we do with partners as reliable and productive as yourselves. So thanks for allowing me.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
If you have any feedback about the report or questions, comments, concerns, a lot of our work depends on the feedback of American Muslims. So don't hesitate to reach out to us at info@mpac.org.
Very good. Any criticisms I have, I'll put them on Twitter. And you can find them there. But honestly, guys, thank you very much. I'm so happy that we can do this. I'm very proud of our organizations working together at this time. Absolutely. And may more power be to us. And so, inshallah khair for everybody. Thank you all for being with us. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Like